The neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat outside the dusty diner on the edge of Route 66, casting erratic shadows across the cracked asphalt. It was just past midnight, the kind of hour when the desert wind whispered secrets to the empty highway, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and regret. Inside, the air hung heavy with the grease of overcooked burgers and stale coffee, the only sounds the hum of an ancient fridge and the occasional clink of a spoon against porcelain. Madison wiped her hands on her apron for the umpteenth time, her broad shoulders slumping under the weight of another 12-hour shift. At 42, she was no stranger to the grind. Her reflection in the pie case mirror showed a woman whose curves had softened into something the world called unseen, her laugh lines etched deeper by years of serving dreams to strangers who never stayed. But tonight felt different, heavier. The last customer, a trucker with eyes like chipped flint, had just lumbered out, leaving behind a crumpled 20 and a leer that made her skin crawl. She locked the door, flipped the sign to "closed," and sank onto a stool, her fingers trembling as she lit a cigarette. The smoke curled upward, blurring the tears she refused to let fall. 7 years, 7 long, lonely years since she'd felt a man's touch that wasn't born of pity or payment. Her husband had walked out after the accident, the one that left her with scars hidden under loose uniforms and a heart armored in silence. The town whispered about her, called her the fat waitress with a chuckle, but no one knew the fire that still burned beneath, waiting for a spark. That's when the rumble started. Low at first, like thunder rolling in from the Badlands, then building into a symphony of roaring engines that shook the windows. Headlights pierced the darkness, a convoy of chrome and leather slicing through the night. Ethan Ghost. Harlan pulled up first, his old Harley-Davidson coughing to a stop, as if it too carried ghosts from wars long buried. He was 38, built like forged steel from years in the Marines, and longer on the road. His face a map of faded tattoos and a jaw set against the world's cruelties. The patch on his vest read Iron Vow, a club born from battlefield promises, brothers who'd sworn to protect the forgotten when the system failed them. Behind him, a dozen more bikes idled, their riders shadows in the glow, but Ethan waved them on. He needed this stop, a ritual before the long ride south to honor a debt from '09, a promise to a fallen comrade's kin. He pushed through the door, just as Madison stubbed out her smoke, the bell jingling like a warning. She straightened, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sorry, hon, we're closed, unless you're buying the whole pot of coffee." Her voice was warm, laced with that Midwestern grit, but Ethan saw the cracks, the way her hands fidgeted, the flicker of fear when his boots thudded on the linoleum. He slid onto a counterstool, his leather jacket creaking, the scent of road dust and engine oil mingling with the diner's haze. "Just a black coffee, if you don't mind the hour." His eyes, steel grey and steady, met hers without judgment. Madison poured it anyway, the steam rising like a veil between them. As she set the mug down, her resolve cracked. Maybe it was the loneliness in his gaze, mirroring her own, or the way he didn't stare at her like the others. Words tumbled out before she could stop them. "You know, it's been 7 years since anyone saw me as more than this." She gestured vaguely at herself, her cheeks flushing under the fluorescent lights. 7 years without, intimacy. Feels like a lifetime. The mug slipped from Ethan's hand, coffee splashing across the counter in a dark bloom. He didn't flinch, didn't laugh, just stared, the weight of her confession hitting him like shrapnel from an old explosion. In that moment, the diner faded, and he saw her not as a stranger, but as a warrior scarred by battles unseen. His own past clawed up, the wife who'd left after his discharge, the nightmares that kept him riding endless miles, chasing redemption for promises broken in the sand. "Ma'am," he said softly, his voice rough as gravel, "that ain't a confession. That's a cry for justice in a world that forgot how to listen." Madison blinked, wiping at the spill with a rag, her laugh bitter. Justice? In this dump? You're funny, biker man. But Ethan's expression didn't waver. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a worn photo, a faded snapshot of his squad, brothers in arms who'd vowed never to leave one behind. I made a promise once, long ago, to stand for those the road tries to bury. What's your name? Madison, she whispered, the name feeling foreign on her tongue after so long. Ethan. He extended a hand, calloused and steady. As their palms met, something shifted in the air, electric as a storm front. Outside, the convoy's engines revved faintly in the distance, a reminder that he couldn't stay. But in that grip, a new vow sparked, unspoken, yet ironclad. He wouldn't ride away without helping her unearth whatever shadow had stolen her light. The conversation stretched into the witching hour, words weaving like smoke. Madison spoke of the accident, not details, just the ache of loss, the way small-town gossip had twisted her into a punchline. Ethan listened, his nods measured, sharing fragments of his own ghosts, the IED that took his best friend, the oath that bound his club to acts of quiet honor. We don't fight with fists alone, he said, eyes on the horizon visible through the window. We fight with truth. What's haunting you, Madison? The kind that needs more than coffee to chase away. She hesitated, then pulled a crumpled letter from her apron pocket, its edges frayed. This came yesterday from an old associate. Says he knows about the night everything changed. Wants money to keep quiet. Her voice cracked. The fear raw. Ethan's jaw tightened. Corruption's stench was familiar, the kind that poisoned small towns like this one. Burn it, he said simply, or let me help you face it. Dawn crept in, painting the desert gold, as Ethan stood. The convoy would wait no longer, the promised South called, but he pressed a burner phone into her hand. Call if the shadows close in. Iron vow doesn't break its word. Madison watched him mount his bike, the engine's roar a promise of thunder to come. As he vanished into the light, she felt the first stir of fire in her chest, a redemption not just for her, but for the family she'd lost, reborn in the unlikeliest alliance. The diner door swung shut behind the echo, but the air hummed with possibility. Ethan's ride south would twist back here, he knew it. Promises had a way of pulling you home, no matter the miles. And Madison? For the first time in 7 years, she wasn't invisible. She was seen. And that changed everything. If you're watching this, hit that like button. If a stranger's kindness ever pulled you from the dark, it might just save someone's road ahead. The desert sun climbed higher, turning the asphalt into a shimmering ribbon that stretched endlessly south. Ethan's Harley thrummed beneath him, a faithful beast that had carried him through sandstorms and silences alike. The wind whipped at his vest, carrying the faint tang of hot rubber and distant rain, but his mind wasn't on the road ahead. It lingered back at that diner, on Madison's eyes, wide with a vulnerability that mirrored the raw edges of his own scars. The burner phone weighed heavy in his saddlebag, a tether to a promise he'd made without words. Iron vow wasn't just a patch. It was blood and oath, forged in the heat of desert ops where brothers had fallen, leaving debts that time couldn't erase. This one? It felt personal, like the universe handing him a chance to mend what his own ghosts had torn. Miles blurred into hours, the convoy a loose formation of chrome guardians rumbling toward a dusty town called Redemption Flats. There, an old Marine buddy's widow waited, her letters pleading for help against land grabbers who'd turned a veteran's farm into a ghost. Ethan gripped the handlebars tighter, the leather creaking under his knuckles. He'd sworn to her husband Jake in a foxhole under fire, "We get home, brother, or we don't." But the family's mine to watch. Jake hadn't made it, but Ethan had. And now, with the club's full weight, 50 strong, from welders to wanderers. They'd ride in like Judgment Day, not with guns blazing, but with lawyers, witnesses, and the unyielding truth that corruption feared most. By midday, they pulled into a roadside motel, the kind with peeling paint and a vending machine that spat warm sodas. Ethan dismounted, his boots crunching on gravel as he nodded to his second, a grizzled vet named Lucas Forge Ramirez. Lucas, broad as a barn door, with a scar tracing his jaw from a shrapnel kiss, clapped Ethan's shoulder. "You look like you swallowed sand, Ghost. That diner stop rattle you." Ethan grunted, waving it off, but Lucas's eyes narrowed. Brothers knew when shadows lingered. They gathered in the motel's shadowed courtyard, engines cooling with metallic ticks, the air thick with the scent of chain oil and cheap barbecue from a nearby pit stop. Maps unrolled on a picnic table, plans sketched in grease pencil, infiltrate the town hall records, expose the forged deeds, stand as the wall between a widow and her ruin. But as the sun dipped toward the jagged horizon, Ethan's phone buzzed. A cheap flip model, not the burner. It was the club's line, patched through from headquarters up north. "Ghost, it's Samuel. Got a tip from one of our eyes in Willow Creek. That's the town by your diner stop. Chatter about a waitress getting squeezed. Blackmail, sounds like. Name's Madison. Ring any bells?" Ethan's blood ran cold, the pieces slamming together like a poorly welded frame. The letter she'd shown him, that crumpled threat. Corruption's tendrils reached far, snaking from small-town crooks to bigger shadows. "Yeah," he said, voice low as he stepped away from the group, the motel's neon sign buzzing overhead like angry hornets. "It rings. Hold the line. I'm looping back." He didn't wait for the club's nod. Promises pulled harder than orders. Revving his engine, he peeled out north, leaving the convoy to handle Redemption Flats without him. The road reversed, a black vein pulsing under his tires, the wind now a howl of urgency. Hours later, twilight bled purple across the sky as he crested the hill overlooking Willow Creek. The town sprawled like a forgotten promise, clapboard houses sagging under the weight of secrets, streetlights flickering on like wary eyes. The diner glowed ahead, a beacon in the gloom, but Ethan's gut twisted. No lights inside, just the closed sign swaying in the breeze. He killed the engine a block away, boots silent on the cracked sidewalk as he approached. The air carried the chill of evening dew mixed with something sharper. Fear, maybe, or the acrid bite of burnt coffee. Peering through the window, he saw her, Madison, hunched over the counter, her apron discarded like shed skin. She clutched that same letter. Now torn at the edges, her face pale under the dim emergency light. A shadow moved in the back. A man, slick-haired and suited, gesturing sharply, his voice muffled but venomous through the glass. Ethan's hand instinctively went to the knife at his belt, but he reined it in. Iron Val fought smart, not savage. He circled to the alley, the diner's back door ajar, spilling warm light and the murmur of confrontation. "You think a biker changes anything?" The man's voice slithered out, oily and entitled. "Pay up, or that accident of yours gets a sequel, in the papers, with your name dragged through." Madison's reply was steel wrapped in tremble. "I told you, Harlan, wait, no, I won't be your pawn anymore." The name hit Ethan like a gut punch. Harlan, his own last name, twisted into this venom. Flashes assaulted him, the accident she'd hinted at, whispers of a cover-up involving his estranged brother Caleb, a cop gone rogue, trading badges for bribes. Caleb, who'd vanished after the war, leaving Ethan to carry the family's fractured honor. The pieces fit too neatly, a noose tightening around old wounds. Ethan stepped into the doorway, his silhouette filling the frame like a storm cloud. "Evening, folks. Mind if I join the family reunion?" The man spun, face paling as recognition dawned. The Harlan resemblance was unmistakable, blood calling to blood. Madison's eyes widened, relief flooding her features like dawn breaking. "Ethan, you came." The intruder backed up, hands raised, but Ethan's gaze pinned him, steady as a sniper's. "Caleb's little errand boy, huh? Tell him the ghosts are riding back. An iron vow? We don't forget debts." The man bolted, scrambling into the night. But Ethan didn't chase. He crossed to Madison, the floorboards creaking under his weight, and took the letter from her shaking hands. Words blurred under his thumb, threats of exposure, hints at the crash that buried secrets, a demand for silence money. She sank against the counter, the weight of years sloughing off in a quiet sob. "It was your brother. He was there that night. The accident. Covered it up for his bosses. Left me to rot in the aftermath. Said it'd ruin us both if it came out." Ethan's jaw clenched, the past roaring up like an unchecked engine. Caleb, the golden boy who'd traded oaths for shadows, dragging innocence down. But in Madison's gaze, he saw not just victim, but survivor. A woman who'd carried this alone, her intimacy stolen by shame's heavy chain. "We face it together," he said, voice a vow etched in gravel. "Call the club. My brothers are en route. This ends with truth, not threats." Outside, distant engines growled, the convoy, diverted by his signal, closing in like loyal hounds. Madison nodded, her hand finding his, the touch a spark in the dim light. Redemption wasn't a destination, it was this moment. Two scarred souls, forging a new promise under the stars. But as the first bike crested the hill, Ethan knew the road ahead twisted darker. Caleb's web ran deep, and family, blood or chosen, demanded a reckoning. The diner's bell jingled faintly, a herald of thunder to come. The roar of engines swelled like an approaching tempest, shattering the fragile quiet of Willow Creek's back alleys. Headlights sliced through the twilight, painting the diner's walls in stark contrasts of shadow and gleam, as the Iron Vow convoy crested the hill in a thunderous wave. Ethan stood firm by Madison's side, his hand still enveloping hers, an anchor in the storm of revelations that had just crashed over them. The air thickened with the scent of hot exhaust and resolve, the ground vibrating under the weight of 20 bikes pulling up in a disciplined arc, their riders dismounting with the precision of men who'd faced chaos and chosen order. Lucas "Forge" Ramirez led the pack, his massive frame unfolding from the saddle like a blacksmith rising from the forge. He scanned the scene with eyes honed by too many night ops, nodding once to Ethan before his gaze settled on Madison. "Ghost called it in. Said we got family business." The word family hung there, not blood but bond, the kind forged in foxholes and on forgotten roads. Samuel Echo Tate followed close, lean and watchful, his fingers already tapping coordinates into a rugged tablet. The club's tech whisperer, turning whispers into weapons of truth. Madison pulled back slightly, her breath catching at the sight of them. Leather-clad guardians emerging from the dusk. Not marauders, but sentinels, their vests gleaming under the emerging streetlights. The diner's back door swung wider, spilling fluorescent warmth into the cooling night, and she gestured them inside. This is more than I asked for." Her voice wavered, but there was steel in it now, tempered by Ethan's unyielding presence. He released her hand only to guide her to a booth, the vinyl seats sighing under their weight as the club filtered in, filling the space with the low murmur of voices and the faint clink of keys and holsters, tools for justice, not vengeance. Ethan spread the crumpled letter on the table, its ink smudged like old wounds. "Caleb's Reach," he said flatly, the name tasting like ash. The brothers leaned in, the air humming with shared history. Caleb Harlan, Ethan's blood kin, a shadow from their shared youth, twisted by the badge he'd sworn to uphold. Whispers from the club's network painted him as a sheriff gone sour, trading small-town power for bigger payoffs, his web snaring the vulnerable like Madison. The accident 7 years back. Not just a crash, but a cover-up. A hit-and-run pinned on shadows, with Caleb pulling strings to bury evidence, leaving her scarred and silenced. Her life unraveling in the aftermath. Lucas traced a scar on the table's edge, his voice a rumble. He was always the snake-in-the-grass ghost. Remember '09? That op in the dunes? He bailed early, left us hanging for his own skin. Nods rippled through the group, memories surfacing like ghosts in the steam from fresh coffee Madison poured with steady hands. Samuel pulled up grainy files on his tablet, fictionalized reports of similar squeezes in nearby towns, patterns of coercion masked as law. He's got eyes everywhere, but we've got ears too. This letter? It's bait. He wants her broken before she talks. Madison's fingers tightened around her mug, the porcelain warm against the chill of fear. The night it happened. I was driving home from a shift like any other. Fog on the road, headlights blinding, then impact, metal twisting, glass shattering. I woke in the hospital, alone, with nurses whispering about traces of interference. Caleb showed up days later, all smiles and badges, said it'd be our secret. Pay the fines quiet or lose everything. My home, my name, my sense of self. She paused. Eyes meeting Ethan's, the vulnerability raw but unbroken. He took more than my body healed from. He stole the trust that lets you feel human. Ethan's jaw set, the weight of brotherhood, of chosen and blood, pressing like a vice. He'd ridden south to honor Jake's widow, but this pull was visceral, a promise reborn in the diner's dim light. "No more secrets," he said, voice cutting through the murmurs. "We expose him, clean, witnesses, records, whatever it takes." The plan unfolded like a blueprint. Samuel hacking public ledgers for discrepancies in the crash report, Lucas rallying local allies, a mechanic who'd fixed Caleb's cruiser too many times, a nurse from the old hospital with faded logs. They'd build a case not of fury, but fact, turning the town's corruption against itself. As midnight deepened, the group dispersed into the night, bikes humming softly as scouts peeled off to gather threads. Ethan lingered with Madison, the diner now a war room of scattered maps and cooling cups. She wiped down the counter, movements deliberate, the rhythm a balm against the turmoil. "Why you?" she asked softly, turning to face him. The fluorescent buzz overhead, casting her in a halo of quiet strength. "Out of all the roads, why stop here?" He stepped closer, the scent of her, vanilla soap and faint diner grease, mingling with his own road-worn earthiness. "Promises," he replied, simple as a vow. "Made one to my squad, protect the overlooked. Made another to myself after the sand, don't let the dark win quiet." His hand brushed her arm, not demanding but affirming, a spark that reignited what years had dimmed. In her eyes he saw his own redemption mirrored, the chance to mend a fractured legacy, to stand against the brother who'd betrayed them both. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the distant howl of coyotes, a reminder that the desert held no mercy for the weak. But inside, alliances solidified. Madison pocketed the burner phone Ethan had given her earlier, now linked to the club's network. "Together, then," she whispered, the word a bridge over the abyss. Dawn would bring the first moves, an anonymous tip to a regional watchdog group, veiled enough to stir without alerting Caleb's spies. Yet as Ethan mounted his bike for a perimeter sweep, a shadow flickered at the alley's edge. A tale, perhaps, Caleb's paranoia manifesting. The engine's growl masked his tension, but he knew the road ahead forked sharply. Justice demanded patience, but family, chosen or cursed, called for sacrifice. Madison watched from the door, her silhouette framed in light, no longer alone in the fight. The stars wheeled overhead, witnesses to oaths renewed. As the convoy's distant rumble promised thunder on the horizon, this wasn't the end of shadows. It was the dawn of their unraveling. The first light of dawn crept over Willow Creek like a hesitant witness, gilding the rooftops in pale gold and chasing the night's shadows into the crevices of the town. The diner's windows fogged slightly from the warmth of bodies and brewing coffee, the air inside thick with the aroma of fresh grounds and the faint metallic tang of determination. Ethan leaned against the counter, his silhouette etched sharp against the rising sun, as Madison moved with renewed purpose, flipping the sign to "Open" for the early risers who might wander in. But this morning the place felt less like a refuge and more like a fortress. Its booths occupied by Iron Vow brothers, nursing mugs and murmuring strategies, their leather vests a patchwork of oaths sewn in thread and time. Lucas Forge Ramirez hunched over the table, his thick fingers sketching roots on a napkin stained with grease spots, the paper crinkling under his touch. Caleb's holed up in that sheriff's office on Main, but his real power's in the back rooms. Deals with developers, sniffing around the old crash site. We hit the records first, quiet-like. Samuel's got a line on a clerk who's tired of the rot. Samuel, echo. Tate nodded from across the booth, his tablet screen glowing faintly, casting blue highlights on his angular face. He'd spent the night weaving digital threads, anonymous queries into county archives, pulling up echoes of the accident report, redacted lines hinting at tampered timestamps, a witness statement buried like contraband. The screen's soft beep punctuated the hush, a digital heartbeat syncing with the club's resolve. Madison paused mid-pour, the coffee pot trembling slightly in her grip as she overheard. Her reflection in the stainless steel backsplash showed a woman transformed, not the invisible server of yesterdays, but a partner in the fray, her eyes alight with a fire Ethan had ignited. That site, it's just outside town, where the road dips into the ravine. I haven't gone back since. Her voice was steady, but the memory clawed at her, the screech of tires on wet asphalt, the jolt that upended her world, leaving her body marked by signs of impact and her spirit chained by silence. Caleb's intervention had been a poison gift, promises of protection twisted into leverage, her isolation a price for his secrets. Ethan crossed to her side, his boot heels thudding softly on the linoleum, the scent of his leather jacket, worn earth and faint gun oil, grounding her. "You don't have to," he murmured, close enough that his breath stirred a loose strand of her hair. But she shook her head, meeting his gaze with a resolve that mirrored his own buried scars. "I do. For the me I lost that night, and for whatever's left of your family worth saving." The word family landed heavy, a bridge over the chasm between blood ties and chosen bonds. Ethan's mind flashed to Caleb as a boy, shared backyard scuffles, dreams of badges and honor, now corrupted into this spectre haunting innocence. The promise he'd made to their father on a deathbed whisper years ago echoed, "Watch each other's backs, boys. Blood's thicker than the lies we tell." But blood could curdle, and Ethan had learned the hard way that loyalty's true measure lay in the ride, not the vein. The group mobilized as the town stirred, engines purring to life outside like restrained thunder. Ethan and Madison led the way in his truck, a battered Ford borrowed from the club's stash, its dashboard cluttered with faded photos of fallen brothers, while the bikes fanned out in pairs, shadows on the periphery. The road to the crash site wound through scrubland, the desert air rushing in through cracked windows, carrying the dry whisper of sage and the sharper bite of dust devils swirling in the distance. Madison's hands twisted in her lap, knuckles white against the worn denim. But Ethan's steady presence, his arm brushing hers at a turn, anchored her. "Tell me about him," she said after a stretch of silence, the engine's hum underscoring her words. "Caleb!" Before the badge turned him. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel, the leather creaking. He was the talker, always spinning stories to get us out of scraps. Joined the force right after high school, swore it'd make him a hero. But the war changed me more, saw promises kept in the dirt, while he chased shortcuts stateside. Flashes assaulted him, letters from home ignored amid sand-swept patrols, Caleb's voice on crackly lines promising, "I've got your back, bro." Now those words soured into the threats on that letter, a betrayal that cut deeper than any shrapnel. He covered for the wrong people that night, a developer buddy's car maybe, fleeing a deal gone bad. Pinned it on you to keep the lights off his racket. They crested the hill, the ravine unfolding below like a scar on the earth's skin, twisted guardrails long unrepaired, wildflowers pushing through cracked concrete in defiant bloom. The site was overgrown, a forgotten testament to haste and hush, the air still humming with phantom echoes of that foggy collision. Madison stepped out first, her shoes crunching on gravel, the wind tugging at her apron tied loosely around her waist. Ethan flanked her, his eyes scanning the horizon for tails, while Lucas and Samuel combed the edges, metal detectors whirring softly over the underbrush. A glint caught the sun, a shard of tail light perhaps, or something more, a discarded badge clip, initials scratched faint but legible. C.H. Samuel muttered, bagging it carefully, his voice low. Jackpot. But as they pieced together the ground, tire marks faded but traceable, a rusted fender half buried, the air shifted. A distant siren wailed, cutting through the morning calm like a warning shot. Caleb's spies or worse. Ethan's radio crackled. "Ghost, we've got company. 2 cruisers inbound from town. Forge out." Adrenaline surged, hot and familiar, but Ethan reined it in, pulling Madison behind a boulder cluster, their breaths sinking in the tense hush. "Stay low," he whispered, his body shielding hers, the warmth of him a bulwark against the rising fear. The cruisers crested the rise, gravel spitting under tires, but the bikes were already in motion, a diversionary rumble drawing them off. Engines roaring like defiant lions. In the chaos, Madison's hand found a small dented locket half sunk in the dirt. Her own, lost that night, its chain snapped. She clutched it, tears blurring the ravine's edge, the metal cool against her palm. This proves I was here first, not fleeing, not at fault." Ethan's nod was fierce, pocketing the find with the clip. "Proof's our weapon." Caleb's web unravels with every thread. As the sirens faded, chased by the club's feint, they retreated, the truck kicking up dust on the return road, the sun now blazing overhead like judgment's eye. Back at the diner, the midday rush masked their debrief, plates clattering as locals oblivious to the undercurrent. But Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Back off, brother. Some debts stay buried." Caleb's voice in pixels, a gauntlet thrown, the moral fork sharpened. Expose him and risk the family's fragile remnants, or walk away and let corruption claim another soul. Ethan met Madison's eyes across the counter, her smile tentative but real, the locket now around her neck, a talisman of reclaimed truth. The chosen family around them, brothers nursing coffees, plans evolving, offered the answer. Honor demanded the ride, no matter the cost. Yet as afternoon shadows lengthened, a deeper dilemma gnawed, redemption for Caleb or justice without mercy. The desert wind rattled the windows, carrying whispers of storms to come, and Ethan knew the next move would test every vow he'd ever made. If this tale of buried truths and unbreakable bonds is stirring something in you, hit that like button. Let's show the world that stories of quiet courage deserve to roar. The afternoon sun beat down on Willow Creek like an unrelenting interrogator, turning the diner's roof into a blistering tin drum that amplified every creak and sigh of the building. Inside, the air conditioner wheezed in futile protest, stirring the sense of sizzling onions and cooling pie crusts into a humid haze. Ethan paced the length of the counter, his boots leaving faint scuffs on the worn linoleum, each step a measured echo of the turmoil churning in his chest. The threatening text from Caleb burned in his pocket like a lit fuse, its words a venomous callback to boyhood pacts now poisoned. Madison moved behind the grill, flipping burgers with mechanical precision, but her eyes, sharp and searching, kept drifting to him, the locket at her throat glinting like a badge of reclaimed defiance. The Iron Vow brothers had scattered to their posts after the ravine raid. A web of vigilance spun across the town. Lucas Forge Ramirez staking out the sheriff's office from a shadowed garage, his massive form hunched over a chessboard of surveillance notes. Samuel Echo Tate holed up in a rented room above the hardware store, his tablet a glowing oracle sifting through digital debris for Caleb's financial trails. The finds from the site, the badge clip, the locket, tire impressions photographed in high res were locked in Ethan's saddlebag, ammunition for the moral siege ahead. But as the lunch crowd thinned, leaving greasy plates and crumpled napkins in their wake, the weight of choice settled heavier than desert dust. Madison slid a plate across the counter, fries golden and crisp, a peace offering amid the storm. "Eat something, Ethan. You look like you're carrying the whole ravine on your back." Her voice was soft, laced with that Midwestern warmth that had cracked his armor from the start, but now it carried an undercurrent of shared resolve. He sat, the stool groaning under him, and picked at the food, the salt sharp on his tongue. Caleb's text. It's not just a warning. It's him testing if blood still binds. He pulled out the phone, the screen's glow harsh in the dimming light, and read it aloud. "Back off, brother. Some debts stay buried." The words hung there, a noose of nostalgia twisted into threat. She leaned on the counter, elbows braced, her apron strings tied tight like battle harness. "He was your brother once. Is there anything left to salvage, or is this just another promise you break for the road?" The question pierced, stirring ghosts Ethan had long outrun. Caleb, as the kid brother tagging along on fishing trips, eyes wide with hero worship. The letters from basic training, full of bravado about upholding the line. But the war had carved Ethan into steel, while stateside temptations had bent Caleb towards shadows, deals with land barons, cover-ups for the powerful, all justified as protecting the family name. The accident had been his first big slip, burying evidence of a drunk developer fleeing a botched bribe, pinning the blame on Madison's foggy night drive to frame her as the reckless one. 7 years of her silence had bought his assent, but now the threads unraveled, pulling Ethan into the fray. He set the phone down, the clatter sharp against the formica. Salvage. Maybe, but redemption ain't free. He chose corruption over honor, over us. Dad's dying words were about watching backs, not stabbing them. Ethan's voice roughened, graveled from too many unsaid regrets, and he met her gaze, seeing his own fractures reflected. The intimacy he'd forsaken after his wife's departure, nights spent riding to outpace the emptiness. Madison's confession that first night had bridged them, her 7-year drought a mirror to his isolation, forging a bond deeper than blood. We expose him clean. No guns, no graves, just truth, like the vow demands. But if he pushes, I can't promise I'll hold back the thunder. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows with grains of sand that pattered like impatient fingers. A pickup rumbled past, its taillights fading into the haze, but Ethan's instincts prickled, eyes in the periphery, Caleb's network closing ranks. The burner buzzed then, Samuel's voice crackling through. "Ghost! Got a hit!" Caleb's dipping into offshore accounts, shell companies tied to that developer from the crash. And get this, the widow in Redemption Flats, her farm's next on the list. He's playing both ends, squeezing for a bigger payout. The revelation landed like a gut shot, linking Madison's nightmare to Ethan's original ride south, a web of greed spanning towns, preying on the vulnerable. Caleb wasn't just a rogue sheriff. He was the architect of forgotten promises, turning oaths into leverage. Madison's face paled, but she straightened, wiping her hands on a towel with deliberate calm. Then we cut the strings. Tonight, I know a back way into the records room, janitor's access from my old shifts at the courthouse. Her offer was bold, a leap from the woman who'd hidden in silence. Now stepping into the light of alliance, Ethan nodded, the plan crystallizing. Infiltrate under Dusk's cover, copy the unredacted files, cross-reference with Samuel's digs. The chosen family would ride point, Lucas as muscle if needed, but silent, shadows not storms. As the sun dipped, painting the desert in bloody oranges, they geared up in the diner's alley, the air cooling to a crisp edge that carried the faint howl of incoming night. Ethan's Harley idled low, a faithful growl masking the tension in his frame as Madison climbed on behind him, her arms wrapping his waist. The first real touch beyond handshakes, warm and trusting against the chill. The engine's vibration thrummed through them, a pulse of unity as they peeled out. The convoy's distant scouts falling in like ghosts. The town blurred past, faded billboards promising better tomorrows, porch lights flickering on like wary beacons. At the courthouse, a squat brick relic squatting on the edge of town. They dismounted in the deepening twilight, the structure's shadows swallowing them whole. Madison led, her key turning smooth in the side door, the hinges whispering secrets as they slipped inside. The records room was a crypt of filing cabinets and dusty fluorescents, the air stale with paper and neglect. They worked fast, flashlights cutting beams through the gloom, pulling drawers with muffled scrapes. Ethan scanned folders, his fingers tracing faded ink. The accident report, unredacted now, revealing tampered witness logs. Caleb's signature scrawled like a confession. Here, Madison breathed, holding a photo, grainy but damning, the developer's car at the scene, no trace of her own. But as triumph sparked, footsteps echoed from the hall, heavy, deliberate. A door creaked open down the corridor, voices low and urgent, Caleb's deputies, or worse, the man himself. Ethan doused the lights, pulling Madison into an alcove. Their bodies pressed close in the suffocating dark, breaths shallow and synced. The intruder's beams swept the room, inches from their hiding spot, the scent of cheap cologne and authority mingling with the musty files. "Check the crash files. Boss says someone's sniffing," one growled, cabinets rattling like bones in a grave. Heart pounding, Ethan gripped her hand, the moral precipice yawning. Bolt now with partial proof, or wait and risk capture, forcing a confrontation that could shatter everything. Madison's whisper cut the tension. "We finish this, for the promises we both broke to survive." They held, statues in the night, until the footsteps faded, engines revving outside like retreating predators. Emerging, they grabbed the files, slipping out into the starlit yard, where bikes waited in silent vigil. Back at the diner, under the neon's erratic pulse, Samuel synced the hall, irrefutable links to Caleb's empire of shadows. But as Ethan stared at the evidence spread like a battlefield map, doubt clawed. Sending it to the regional oversight board meant ending Caleb's career, maybe more. Jail, disgrace, a family legacy in ruins. Yet in Madison's steady gaze, the answer burned clear. Justice wasn't vengeance. It was the honor of standing firm, redeeming the lost through truth's unyielding light. The clock ticked toward midnight, the desert wind moaning promises of reckoning as Ethan keyed the transmission. The web would tear, but the bonds forged here, chosen, unbreakable, would endure. Still, in the quiet aftermath, he wondered if Caleb's final plea might force a face-to-face, testing the line between brother and betrayer, one last time. The midnight hour cloaked Willow Creek in a velvet shroud, the stars sharp as shrapnel overhead, indifferent witnesses to the unraveling below. The diner's neon sign hummed its final flicker before Ethan killed the power, plunging the lot into inky quiet, broken only by the distant yip of coyotes and the soft tick of cooling engines. Inside, the evidence lay spread across the counter like a surgeon's tools. Files yellowed with age, photos stark under a single desk lamp, Samuel's tablet casting an ethereal glow on the faces gathered around. Lucas Forge Ramirez cracked his knuckles, the sound like distant thunder, while Madison stood at Ethan's side, her locket catching the light, a quiet emblem of truths unearthed. The transmission had gone out an hour ago, Ethan's voice steady over the encrypted line to the regional oversight board, coordinates, timestamps, the unredacted crash report linking Caleb's signature to buried evidence, offshore trails tying him to land grabs that preyed on widows and workers alike. No accusations, just facts, the Iron Vow way, letting justice ride in on its own chrome. But as the clock's hands crept toward one, the air thickened with anticipation, the scent of stale coffee mingling with the faint ozone of tension. Ethan's phone lay silent, but his gut knew better. Blood called to blood, and Caleb wouldn't fade without a final snarl. Headlights pierced the gloom first, slicing through the alley like accusatory fingers. A single cruiser rolled to a stop, its engine cutting off with a guttural sigh, gravel crunching under heavy boots. The door swung open, and there he was, Caleb Harlan, silhouetted against the dashboard's dying red glow. Taller than Ethan remembered, but hollowed by years of shadows, his uniform rumpled, badge glinting like a false promise. He approached the diner door alone, hands visible, no deputies in tow. A lone wolf scenting the trap, or perhaps clinging to one last thread of brotherhood. Ethan met him at the threshold, the bells jingle a mocking chime as the door eased open. The brothers flanked the room's edges, shadows in leather, but this was family business, chosen and cursed. Madison hovered near the grill, her stance unyielding, the warmth of the kitchen at her back like a hearth against the chill seeping in. Caleb's eyes, once bright with boyish fire, now dulled by compromise, flicked over the assembly before locking on Ethan. "Brother," he said, voice low and laced with gravel, stepping inside without invitation. The air between them crackled, heavy with unspoken oaths from childhood forts and father's graveside vows. "You came," Ethan replied, neutral as desert stone, gesturing to the counter where the files waited. No rage, just the weight of truth. Caleb's gaze swept the evidence, his face tightening like weathered leather under strain. He picked up the photo, the developer's car at the ravine. No sign of Madison's, his fingers trembling faintly before he set it down. This is a mistake. Old business, buried for reasons bigger than us." His words slithered out, justifications honed by boardroom deals. But Ethan saw the cracks, the flicker of regret in eyes that mirrored his own. Madison stepped forward then, her voice cutting the haze like a clear bell. "Bigger than the life you stole. 7 years of silence, of feeling like a ghost in my own skin, all because you chose shadows over right." She gestured to the locket, the metal warm from her touch. "That night, I wasn't the villain. You pinned it on me to protect your climb, left me with scars that went deeper than the wreck." Caleb's jaw worked. No denial, just a weary slump as the weight of her words landed. The diner seemed to shrink around them, the hum of the fridge underscoring the raw vulnerability, sense of lingering grease, a reminder of lives ground down by secrets. Ethan crossed his arms, the leather of his vest creaking softly. "Dad's promise, watch each other's backs. You twisted it, Caleb. Covered for crooks, squeezed the forgotten. Madison, Jake's widow, how many more? Iron Vow rides for them, not the rot." Memories flooded unbidden, shared bikes on dusty trails, Caleb's laugh echoing before the badge bent him. Redemption flickered there, a spark in the ruins. Not absolution, but a chance to step into light. Caleb's shoulders sagged, the fight leaching out like air from a punctured tire. I thought it was survival, protect the name, keep us afloat, but it ate me whole. He met Ethan's gaze, brother to brother, the air thick with the salt of unshed tears. What now? You send this up and I'm done. Family's all that's left. The choice hung, a moral crossroads under the diner's dim bulb. Ethan's hand went to the phone, thumb hovering. But Madison's touch on his arm steadied him, warm, affirming, the intimacy of allies who'd bridged their isolations. Truth sets the debt, she whispered, echoing the vow's creed. Ethan nodded, hitting send on the final packet, not just evidence, but a recorded confession Caleb had unwittingly given in the room's hidden mic, Samuel's quiet tech weaving justice's net. You turn yourself in. Clean slate starts with owning the shadows. We'll stand witness, not as enemies, but as what family should be. Caleb exhaled, the sound ragged, and nodded once, the weight lifting fractionally as dawn's first grey light filtered through the blinds. He turned for the door, pausing to glance at Madison. I'm sorry for the years I stole. She inclined her head, no forgiveness demanded, just release. As his cruiser faded into the paling night, the diner exhaled, the tension uncoiling like a spring-long wound tight. The sun breached the horizon fully now, painting the lot in warm strokes, engines stirring as the convoy prepared to scatter, some south to wrap Jake's widow's fight, others lingering to ensure the board's wheels turned true. Ethan pulled Madison aside, the desert breeze carrying sage and fresh promise, her hand in his, a quiet vow, renewed. You saw me, she said softly. The words from that first confession reversed, now a bridge to tomorrow. He drew her close, the embrace simple, profound, 7 years mended in the warmth of chosen light, his own scars easing under her touch. As the bikes revved, a symphony of redemption rolling out. Ethan mounted his Harley, Madison's smile a beacon in the rear view. Promises fulfilled didn't end roads. They forged new ones, bound by loyalty's iron. Willow Creek receded, but the fire kindled there burned eternal. Justice won not in thunder, but in the steady roar of honor unbroken. Thank you for riding this journey of shadows lifted and vows kept. If these tales of quiet courage touch your road, subscribe for more. Let's keep the stories rolling, one promise at a time.